chair for Africa and April. He's a friend of the Withers Collection. He retired in 2013 and now spends his time serving the community. And believe it or not, this is the third place this month I've seen Cliff dates. Been here 3 times, I think. Once was down at the Withers home when they had a historic marker dedication back on February 10th. Got a nice picture with him with Jerry Williams there. And believe it or not, we were in church together last Sunday. Anybody believe that? I got a witness. Mr. Chisholm was sitting right behind us right there, sitting with us today. So we got a witness. We were all in church last Sunday at New Sardis Baptist Church for the Living Legends program, which Mr. Dates is a member of the Living Legends. It's a great program they do every year at New Sardis. Fifth Dates is everywhere, it seems like. And he's spoken here before, but Mr. Dates, you've heard of Reverend Henry, I guess it's Reverend Henry.
Yeah.
Reverend Henry's experiences here. And anything you want to add, say your own, tell us about the 60s and 68.
Well, what I would like to expound on a little bit would be my experience when I first. Okay. Yeah, my experience when I first encountered Mr. Williams. That was back when I was about 8 to 10 years of age. I was a shoe shine boy on Bill Street, shine shoes, turd. And Mr. Withers, he was one of the 8 original black police officers. I found out later on as part of that group. He and another officer was on foot patrol on Bill Street when I was about 8 years old, out shining shoes on Bill Street. So I didn't know it was Mr. Withers, but I'm saying this, I can explain later on what happened. That blew my mind. So I was shining shoes there for a few weeks about during the summertime. And I was leaving Bill Street, getting dark, get number 8 Chelsea bus, get back home and Dougie, put Dougie down with North Memphis. Wells and Manassas, that area right there. Right here near Gospel Temple Church on Manassas and Wells. Anyway, I was trying to get the bus, get back home, and I was leaving Bill Street. I'm gonna do it right there on Main Street to get to the bus stop. And I was encountered by these 2 white police officers. They was on patrol in a vehicle. So when they pulled over to the curb of the street, they called me over, boy, come here. I had my shoe shine box with a string on my shoulder. I had all this black and brown shoe polish on my fingertips, you know. So he said, where you going? Where you been? Something like that. On Bill Street shining shoes, sir. Got the car, so I searched in my pocket. I had a bunch of change in my pocket for the shining shoes. Nickel quarters down. What you do, Brookie? Somebody stole this money? So what have you done? Broken into a place and stole this money? And I repeat.
You know, close to
I've been shining shoes. So at that time, I can't remember the conversation there with it, but I thought I was about to go to jail or juvenile court, whatever. But at that time, 2 black officers on foot patrol on Bill Street, they was trying to make their runs on the right side of Main Street, so up the east side of Main Street. So they was engaging, I was still being engaged by 2 white officers. So one of the officers, who was Mr. Withers, he said they were very sharp in their blue 3-piece police uniform, and they wore 3-piece suits in, white shirt, black tie, real sharp uniform there. Withers said to the white officer, what are y'all doing with it? You know, all this boy been stealing money from these machines over there for something. He said, oh no, he said, we watched this boy shine shoes from this time of day to this time of day. He earned that money, he had in his pocket. Withers made that statement, I never forget that. So that they let me go. So I went on, caught the bus, and came on home. I said that just reflect what was about to happen some years later. When I turned 18 years of age at Douglas High School at Memphis, slums that area out. We relocated to Douglas Community. I finished Douglas High School. And in 12th grade, I wasn't planning on going to college because I was struggling to get out of high school, so we got drafted for the Vietnam War. And that's what I meant. I didn't want to go to war either. So I wanted to go into the Army. I went and enlisted to the Air Force and was fortunate enough to get to the Air Force for 4-year entitlement. So during the Vietnam War, I left there at the end of July of 1968, was discharged back to Memphis. About that time, of course, in April of that same year, Dr. King had already been assassinated when I got out of the military. So there was recruiting military men and women. No, take that back, just men. So I went ahead and got enlisted in the police department to accelerated training because King had got killed. They had this group called the Invader Group and some other like group, I think won't say. The Panther Group maybe, I know the Invaders. Because I got to go to school with the president of the Invaders, Coach Smith. He and I was in grade school together. He was the president, so they were shooting at the police at that time. They shot one officer in the leg, didn't kill him. But anyway, when I was on the force, I remember going through that situation with the Invaders. And from that time, that's the only role I could reflect on. In 68. So I stayed in the police department for about 1976. I left. We got private license to be a private detective or private investigator. I want to do my own thing. So when I've done that, I encountered an opportunity to be hired by, at that time, Dr. William Pepper was out of London, England. He was here to represent the defense of James Earl Ray, who had been accused of assassinating Dr. King. So I got involved. He hired me as a private investigator to investigate some conspiracy allegations that were going on in Memphis around the time after King was killed. At the same time, I had the opportunity to meet Judge Joe Brown, who was a prominent attorney here in Memphis. Then he was appointed judge of the criminal court, assistant in Sheriff County. And he was approached, or we were approached by HBO. I think I said this correctly. Judge Joe Brown, I hit down a little bit, but he was approached to do a special for mock trial for the death of Dr. King. So the attorney for this matter, who was Dr. William Pepper, yes, it was Dr. William Pepper who did the deal with HBO. So he hired me as one investigator. He hired about 8 more, because we had to go back and reconstruct the crime scene allegations of what was after the death of Dr. King. So my role specifically was to locate witnesses and corroborate the information and get signed sworn affidavit statement. My role. And during that period of time, I was successful in locating at least 4 witnesses who gave me sworn affidavit statements about their role in the death of Dr. King. And so since Judge Joe Brown is on the same format, he was probably good in specific details about that. Because as an investigator, I did what I was asked to do. We did locate one conspirator. And this information is in the book that was written by Dr. William Beck. He did a book on this called Orders to Kill. And he authored that book, so what I'm about to say is already public information. It was a conspirator named Jim Giles. He owned a place called Jim's Place. And that was the location where the lead shooter shot from a window. There were 30-06 rifles that took his life. Dr. King. Also, he had working with him at that same location was his girlfriend. He was a male white, and his girlfriend was a female black. Her name was Betty Spates. We also got someone that did it from her. Admitted in fact that she was there during the course of the shooting. And the role that Jim played, the role that she played. Now, there was another witness who was a tree trimmer for the city of Memphis. He worked in the public works department, I want to say. And he did say that the day of the shooting, he was given orders by the city administrator to go out and trim the bushes that was at addition to where the shooting for a clear shot. Would be the bushes blocking the view of the shooter of this state. And it was another witness that we spoke to that was outside of Memphis. I want to say a small town in Tennessee. His name was McFerrin. Now he was an eyewitness that saw the smoke come from the bush and the sound of a muffled shot, which was in the courtyard of where Dr. King was killed. Which meant that the bullet would have went from a down position over to this struck the shoulder. That's it. Coming out. So we had a conflict of conspiracy of police report, FBI report, revealed something totally different. Then the throwdown weapon was located, which was 30-06 Remington, bolt action. We examined that gun. It had a right twist to the muzzle firing order. And the bullet that was found in Dr. King showed just the opposite, that left twist on the bullet. I think that bullet did not come from the gun that was planted at the scene. So it was a planted weapon at the location based on our investigation. So, trial, which was a mock trial, it revealed all of that information, so it would be conclusive on what happened. Any of y'all remember that HBO special? Y'all remember it was not found not guilty on Dr. When James Earl Ray insisted that he was not guilty. So when Judge Brown gets here, he can go more in detail about what happened on that. And then from that point on, let's see what happened. I want to say 1973. Yeah, I left this out. I apologize for this. I got to go back 3 years prior to that. That's okay. I was an officer on the police department assigned to the South Precinct. And that was the year that we decided to hire female police officers that year. It was June 1973, the first female officer was hired as official a police officer. In that same year, we formed the Afro Police Association, which was seven of us that formed that organization. That was for the sole purpose of fighting discriminatory practices, promoting community relation efforts within our department with our people and our community. So that's how we started. There were seven of us that started. I think two of us remained, the rest of them has passed on. From the point of the Afro Police Association, we were successful in filing lawsuits that correct a lot of the wrongdoing, discriminatory practice that was going on in the police department. We got promotional regress. Better treatment, different policies, and rules. And from that point of my experience as a police officer, I left the police department sometime shortly after that. Became a private investigator, and after that, I pursued a career in the state of Tennessee fraud investigation. And from there, I pursued another career as a criminal investigator with federal government. And then from there, I started business security guard services in this way. I retired in 2012. And I've been retired since then, still is retired. Had that experience in my life. And that's about all I have to contribute to this.
Just set the microphone down. We're gonna say thank you so much, Mr. Davis. We're gonna take about a 5-minute break. Got the refreshments over here on the right, restroom right around the corner. We're relocating Mr. Black right over here to this table, with his name tag up over here. We'll go into some questions and answers from the audience, these gentlemen. Hopefully Judge Joe Brown will make it here by this time. He's on the way. So take a break. Thank you all for coming. He's gonna be right here. Thank you. Stand right here.
How you doing?
My mystery of the tree just got solved.
Oh, really?
We have this image that came back in our new scan of this tree stump, the trash on top of it. And we were like, why would Dr. Willis take a picture of the tree stump with the trash? And Law said she remembered talking about one day I'm gonna find that damn picture where the tree was there. We just talked about public works.
How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
All right.
See you.
It's good to see you.
We just talked about the public works employee that testified that he was ordered to come and cut the bushes down so they would have
Oh, so he took evidence of what they did.
that it was gone.
Yeah.
We got the picture where they covered it up with garbage. So you wouldn't notice
Come on in, y'all. Just take a break right now.
Wow. Wow. You got some more mysteries up there. Y'all just, y'all need to do like some type of TV show or something.
Oh man.
Like, like some type of like History Channel or
We're
something.
working on it.
How you doing?
I just got confirmation that that's what
Right.
that picture is. 'Cause I was like, why would he take a picture?
So he knew this was gonna be important for posterity. He just want to know. Yeah.
But we haven't found the earlier picture where the tree was there. But we got 6,000 more negatives being scanned right now
Oh wow.
in New York.
Wow.
We picked them up
That's awesome.
in March. It's going to be in the matches.
All right. Cool.
But we've been trying to find a way to corroborate his recollection about the tree. He just gave it to us.
Information.
They got a deposition from the public works employee who was sent to cut it down.
Wow.
They said
He's
the tree
still
was
around.
there.
The public works guy gets still.
No, but he gave a deposition.
Oh, that stands up. I think
That
William
stands
Pepper.
up.
Yeah. That's like basically it's good.
That's good because
Yeah.
you had those words had to come out your mouth to be a deposition.
Yeah. Hey, Miss April, how you doing? Yeah, all good. Oh, Ron. Your name is April, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
you got it right.
Okay.
That makes me
I
happy.
remember you showing we ain't found the one with the tree. Of course,
I was
got
kinda-
the pictures.
Yeah.
Are you going to be posting this online?
Yeah.
Okay. How can I see it?
You know, you haven't been seeing this stuff?
No,
Your, what's her name? I forgot. She's been seeing this stuff.
nobody is telling it.
You're on my YouTube channel.
Do you do Instagram at all too?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. You got Instagram or something?
Yeah.
You got a card? Okay, let me.
I'm not professional.
So how you doing? Ron Hurd. Oh, I know you are, Mr. Chisholm. Y'all humble. You know I supposed to know who you are. That name is Gold. Oh yeah, I'll give you my card. You can text me or whatever.
I'll just find you on Instagram.
Okay.
I was gonna give you your card back.
All right, okay, go ahead. I'm not taking your drink, man. I'm sorry about
You
that.
thirsty?
Yeah, I am thirsty actually.
We got me a refresher. Okay, how can I find you?
It's like type in R2C2H2. I think that is it. Yeah, that's me right there. Yeah. So I just came back from the East Coast. Big Gregory had like a big exhibition in Prince George's County, Maryland. Some of his personal collections and artwork and awards he's won over his 60-year career. So his family opened it up. So I covered that. His daughter did a one-woman play. It was pretty good. She's very talented. So worked my way through Charleston, went DC, all that stuff. Went through Atlanta. Just came back from Atlanta yesterday. So I was working my way up and down the coast. Yeah, I'm trying to stay moving.
Hey, yeah, you get to see something new every time.
Yeah, so you follow me on Instagram?
I just followed you.
Okay, so I got what's your
Follow
handle?
back. Chief Rocker.
Chief Rocker. I like that.
Underscores and Rocker.
Okay.
Lords of the Underground record.
Yeah, I know. How you read my mind. Like you too young to know about Lords of the Underground.
I'm 30.
Yeah.
I'm right at that age.
I was thinking about Chief Rocker when you said that. Oh wow.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
That's where it came from.
That's cool. Are you a photographer?
No, not by trade. No, I just do it for fun. I'm gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
For a
Dr.
second.
Black.
Technically not on.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming and being with us tonight. I enjoyed that so much. I hope to do a little bit more and try to get together.
Mr. Henry, you about to leave?
Yeah.
Oh, you got your contact information by any chance?
Yeah.
I need to get a card from you.
But I will give you a call. I'm entering. I'll let you know when we get going.
What's your name?
My name is Ron Hurd.
Ron, Brother Hurd.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Brother Hurd, that's right. Nice to meet you. Were you an invader?
Yeah, I was there too.
Yeah. How you doing, man? I just
No,
came from
I was
Atlanta.
coming to you. With you. I'm coming to you. I'm coming for you.
I'm coming from B. Okay.
I'm coming for you. Yes, I'm coming for you. I need to talk to you.
Okay.
I need some information from
Okay.
you. Did you meet Mr. Hurd? Mr. Ron Hurd?
Oh,
That's your brother. That's your okay, that's your brother.
okay, I feel water. Yeah, yeah.
That's your brother. Okay. Okay. Well, this is
I like
my
that.
son. This is my daughter. So we're all good. I need to talk to you. I
Okay.
really do. I know your information is on the website. If you have a card.
Yeah, I got a card. Let's give you my
Okay,
card.
I really need to talk to you because we might be able to do some business together. Okay.
Yeah, I just came from Atlanta. That's why you said I like it. I
You
couldn't
did?
figure it out for years. Why black folks love Atlanta. But you gotta go to the suburbs a little bit and see what people are doing.
Yeah.
doing some amazing stuff down there.
Marietta.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
have,
like
I have to connect you with my. I'm telling you, he's the one who put me on to.
it's an honor that he thought to come over
He is. He
here.
does. He really does.
What type of work what you into down
He's,
there?
he works for a law firm.
Oh, yeah,
works
definitely.
basically from
I don't even have nothing.
But
Oh.
I'm gonna write it. But yeah, he's all into it. He was trying his best to get up here.
Oh,
Because
really?
I told him he had been coming.
Yeah.
We need to try to do some things, get together on some things. Because we're really expanding a little bit. Bronson is really looking to broaden our audience.
I would do like tag things. I don't know what's going on.
Right. That's
I'm
what
I'm
I'm
going
saying.
crazy.
And she wants this. In fact, she's asked me to take this on to the next level. So we want to do these forums, but we want to expand it. We want to bring in some college students, kind of younger audience,
I like that.
and kind of balance it out. We want to have some specific themes that are relevant to what's going on, that also tie into some things that we have here historically in our images. So we're looking at, we want to do one for sure in March and for sure in April.
Okay.
Coming up.
I just want to talk to y'all about April. I had some ideas for it.
Okay.
I love
I'm
it.
gonna get
Yeah, I mean, maybe this work out for everyone. It's all reason things happen.
So tell me, give me whatever information you want to give.
Okay.
And then we have another project that we're starting. Hasn't been rolled out, hasn't been into format. Haven't even started working on it yet, but
We're gonna start now. We think Judge Brown is on his way.
people in
I heard people about the tree stumps. They're like, they let you know what they did. I'll put it on too. Yeah.
be invited. I put Bronson to your website.
So if I can have your attention, please.
It's on this video. Okay, I will. I'll give you.
Always good to see
I'm
you.
gonna give you mine.
Yes, ma'am. I'm excuse. I'm sorry.
Ron Herb.
I'm sorry. Y'all about to get it.
I'll meet you.
Yes, ma'am. Y'all getting started?
Well, we're gonna try this. We get the guy running from there over here.
Somebody sit right there. Oh, you just trying to get better?
Yeah. Yes, man. How you doing? It's good to see you. Dr. Black, how you doing?
All is well, sir. You?
I'm good. This weather's crazy. Ain't it? It's already spring.
Love it.
Yeah, I ain't complaining. It's interesting.
Reverend Henry told me he had to leave because he had to go take some medicine.
Okay.
Looks like he's getting his medicine from Mr. Chisholm back here.
That's it.
Getting some medicine.
I don't think they hear you.
I know, I'm trying to get him moving on, but we thank Reverend Henry for being here tonight so much and his words that he spoke. Cliff Black over here, Dr. Black.
Whatever.
I was
Yes, sir.
talking about what I heard. He's not from Memphis, he's from Chicago.
All right.
As I understand it, got to Memphis in the 1980s, so we might get a little impression here from the outside looking in, because all of our other panelists over these last few weeks have been from Memphis. And I understand Dr. Black teaches history and some continuing education classes. Okay, I can't pronounce that word right there. So I'm gonna let you kind of explain who you are and then give a few impressions from being not in Memphis about the 1960s and 60s. Then we'll open it up for question and answers, and hopefully Judge Brown will be here by that time. Just hold that close to you.
Well, I go to Chicago, and a lot of the problems that people were suffering in other places, they were not necessarily in Chicago in the same way. And Chicago was probably the most segregated city on the face of the planet. But there's some things that happen that most people don't really know about. Now, I don't know about y'all, but me personally, I was one of those young people who would use like a lab mice, white mouse, white, you know, the little rats in the lab too. And they used me for an integration experiment. Now, I don't know how many of you wound up getting used for integration. So I don't know how many of you wound up going to one of these schools where you got spit on, or where you actually wound up in resource classes because of your complexion. But those are the things that happen. The reason that I'm here right now tonight, because someone asked a question last week, and the question was integration a good thing or a bad thing? Bishop E. Brown tried to address it, and Judge Brown tried to address it. But me personally, I don't think that I heard anyone address the question. I've heard the question quite a number of times. Was integration a good thing or a bad thing? And I keep thinking that we're refusing to talk about it. We are refusing to actually discuss integration. We're refusing to discuss what you call race. We are refusing to discuss these things, even though I hear them all over the TV. I hear everybody talking at this, but very seldom I hear anybody talking about it. I have heard no one talk about where race comes from, how it came into existence, who created it, why was it created, why do you think it's a reality when it's not? The question that was asked was integration a good thing or a bad thing? Are there any white people in here? Would you raise your hand? There are some white people.
They're Canadian, they're not white.
There are some white people in here. Okay, no problem. No, it's not a trick question. I'm serious. And at the same time, if you're a black person, raise your hand. So you got some black people and you got some white people. Well, you see that question about immigration, I think it has to be asked from these different groups of people if they are part of these different groups. In other words, the group of so-called black people may have a different opinion about integration. If there's a group of so-called white people, they may have a different opinion about integration. But I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that whatever you give me is going to be your opinion. And I bet you I know what an opinion is. Now, I don't know about you, but I study words, and I try to get all the children to study language, especially the English language, and how words come into existence. It's called etymology. It is the study of the word. It's very important. And once you understand the language, you can understand what's going on. A lot of us, we don't really know anything about this thing called integration. Where did it come from? How did it get started? When did it start? What was this whole thing about the so-called Civil War? Was it the Civil War? I mean, we go to school and they teach us about the Civil War in school, right? Is that right? I ask children all the time when the Civil War started. They don't have a clue. When did it end? They don't have a clue. I think it was actually the War of Rebellion. I think if you look it up and you actually look the record up, it's not listed as the Civil War. It's listed as the War of Rebellion. I didn't think the American Revolution is listed as the American Revolution in England. It's listed as the insurrection of the British North American colonies. In other words, there's something going on right now that we're not addressing. If the question was asked, did integration work? When did it start? What was the objective? Who created it? What did they want from it? Did any of you get what was supposed to be gotten from the enterprise or from this engagement, this activity of integration? So I'm asking the question that was asked last week. If you benefited from integration, raise your hand. You did. Oh, you did. Well, how did you benefit?
Let's ask her.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is because I really don't think we've ever truly addressed any of this with each other. What we do is we let the news address it. We let somebody on TV tell us what to think about these things. We're not addressing any of these situations for ourselves. I've watched you try, do your best to come up with the thoughts from the community, and you're trying to figure out a way to use the newer technologies and medium to actually put it out there and project it. Well, you're doing the best you can, but you're fighting against odds that you've got a problem with. So now let's ask you, did integration help you?
I would say no,
Why would you say no?
because I lack access to resources that can really make my life, quality of life better.
Okay, well, where would those resources have come from for you before integration?
That's a good question. From the, let me see,
So you don't really know, do you?
the cotton fields,
Cotton fields.
yes, sir.
No, wait, we'll slow down. Before integration, there were people in Memphis, Tennessee, because there was a Black Wall Street in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
There was a family. The family named their child Antonio Maceo. You see, Antonio Maceo is out of Cuba. But the family named their child Antonio Maceo. The reason they named him Maceo is because they didn't know how to pronounce the vowels correctly. You see, the vowel is ah, not a. So because we don't know how to pronounce the vowels correctly, we say Du Bois. We don't say Dubois. But his name was Dubois.
Right.
See, her sister, your cousin, her name is Mercedes. But that's only because we didn't know that we were supposed to be saying Mercedes. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Well, see, in Memphis, there was a young man, his name was, I think it was Willis. What was Willis's first name? No, not Withers. Willis.
A.W.? Yeah.
A.W. Willis.
Right.
And he created what? Supreme Mortgage. You see, that's where your financing came from. It came from people like the Walker family. And it came from people that had enough sense to build their own hospitals, to build their own schools so they could train their children to be dentists and to be doctors. That's where it came from. So, see, when they had this situation under what you call Jim Crow, it made them do something. They built an infrastructure. And believe it or not, this city, and where I come from, in Chicago, it was called Brownsville.
Right.
There was a real infrastructure in place. In New York, Harlem, and Brooklyn, and Wheatfield came into existence. Black Wall Street was not Oklahoma. It was in, was it Durham, North Carolina?
Wilmington.
No, Durham.
Oh.
It's where Spalding Insurance Company was. In Atlanta, you had Herndon, the insurance company on the corner that he built. Look, there was plenty of financing from people. I think Gaston over in Alabama, Fuller in Chicago, W. Clement Stone, and here's what's really strange about W. Clement Stone. They just found out that he was colored. They just found out that he was colored. Didn't nobody know he was colored. All that time, you see his mother had a complexion like my wife. But his mother actually would come to the home. They lived over the, what do you call it, Jeff? On the south. No, going toward the lake. They had a big mansion over there. And she would come home in her maid's outfit. That was his mother. His mother's the one that showed W. Clement Stone how to start the insurance company.
Wow.
That's how he did it. Stone is the one who actually caused where she comes from in Mount Bayou. There was another Black Wall Street. Now understand, we don't know anything about Mount Bayou. And our children are not being taught about A.W. Willis or A. Walker or Gaston or Fuller. And understand something now, before integration, when you were forced to build your own, your children were learning about these people. And they were learning what these people had done. He was talking about, he got out of the Air Force and became the police and then started a security company. The next thing you know, he's the ADT man. Well, what he did tell you is I think the person that handled one of his deals getting out of the business when he retired, wasn't his name Mabry? Holyfield?
Oh.
And Banks and them? Well, here's the thing. See, you said that you couldn't get financed. Well, it's a funny thing. Frank and them learned from a guy named Father McKnight. Father McKnight was the one that not only trained them here, but was the brother in Greenville, Mississippi, out of New Jersey.
Charles.
He started what's called MACE.
Okay.
And understand, these efforts were happening all over the country. Leon Sullivan in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we can go city by city, state by state. You see, you were forced to do something for yourselves. Now integration came along, and now all of a sudden, your children wind up in the resource class. I can't figure that one out. See, what I'm getting at is, why all of a sudden do your children not learn how to read?
Wow.
In other words, before integration, your children were learning how to read. Now all of a sudden, the school superintendent is saying that there's a problem with your children learning how to read because you're impoverished people and you make less than $40,000 a year. So your children can't learn to read. Absolute nonsense.
Wow.
So what I'm getting at is to answer the question, to address the question.
Right.
If I'm not wrong, before integration, I think there was a guy around the corner on Hernando. Wasn't his name Clifford Miller? Wasn't his name Clifford Miller? Had a club called the Flamingo? Yeah. There was another one around the corner. Had a club called Club Handy. If I'm not mistaken, when they made the deal on Beale Street, they told them that they would receive their fair share of whatever went down having to do with contracts. So before integration, you had an infrastructure. After integration, someone else is calling shots and teaching your children. Someone else is calling shots and is in control of you politically. Before integration, you were struggling to be in control of yourself politically. Now, I'm also suggesting this. I'm calling everybody, so-called white people and so-called black people, because y'all all two different sides of the same coin. You're not different people. You are the same exact people. You just got two different styles. You don't have different cultures. You came up in the United States of America. This is weird. After integration, you don't even know the inception date of the country. Come on, y'all. Somebody tell me. When did this country come into existence? Give me a year. Come on, somebody tell me.
1789.
That's only because you've been in my class. Everybody else was in 1776.
76, yeah.
The thing is, what we have to do is we have to go back to that time before integration so we can make some agreements with each other. And we can go into this from the beginning with agreements. We can actually negotiate this correctly because we don't know what the people were doing that did it. And after it was all over with, they didn't know either. How many of you were debriefed? There are some of you in here as old as I am and maybe a little older. Have you ever been debriefed? Come on, y'all. You've never been debriefed.
What you mean by debriefed?
Well, anytime you're in a situation, a traumatic situation, a social situation, social, economic, political, and it creates havoc in your communities. Shouldn't you actually sit down and analyze what has taken place? Shouldn't you analyze how you feel about being beaten up in the bathroom? Shouldn't you analyze how you feel about having to protect yourself going to and coming from school? Shouldn't you actually ask questions of yourself about how you feel about everything that has happened? So far, people have just been telling us how to feel. I don't think that we can continue to do that. At some point, we've got to all honestly talk to each other about how we really feel about this. That will be when we finally decide to integrate. In other words, when you actually decide for yourself, not because of a law, not because the government said you had to do it, but because you want to do it, when you decide, Now we're making progress. How are you gonna come up with a new system? You say you can't get financing to do anything.
Right.
Well, where are you gonna get it from? How hard was it for you to negotiate a basic business deal? It was pretty rough, wasn't it? You spent years manipulating that.
Mm.
And the only reason he pulled it off, I think, is just an opinion.
Uh-huh.
Y'all was smarter. Y'all was smarter than the folks you went up against. Somebody actually provided you with a plan, with a program, and you went step by step, and you pulled it off. Well, that's what everybody's got to do. That's what you've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot blame what happened for our present situation. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Any questions?
No, it's fine.
Any questions? Please. Mr. Chisholm, I know you got something to expound upon here.
I'm just getting educated.
Well, I see the judge coming in right now.
Uh-oh.
What took
The
place.
Battle of Titans are here.
Say that, hold on, Ron. Say it again, sir. We didn't hear you.
They say
Say it again.
Repeat your question.
I said your panelists got far more knowledge about what took place during their lifetime and during their struggle. So I'm learning things myself since I've been here. But the struggle that we've gone through as a people is they're not over with. We still struggle. We're still trying to get there. Ultimately, in the confines of our life and living, if we don't get there, our kids will. But in my lifetime, my prayer to my God is, before I leave here, you let me be able to see a world that don't see race, don't see discrimination, don't see black, and don't see white. That's my prayer. But I know that I will probably never witness that, but my granddaughter will. And that's what I'm looking for.
You say you were traumatized. I mean, you were an integration experiment.
Well, I was sent to foster homes because of the problems that were going on with people. And then I went into a boys' home in Chicago. They integrated the boys' home. I was one of the young people that they used to integrate it on the north side of Chicago. So I wound up graduating from a school that you would call a white school. I wound up being in an institution that you would call a white institution. But that integration experiment in Chicago was no different than the one that was going on here. And this was just an experiment. No one knew where it was going. No one planned it. They just put a bunch of children out there on the street and hope for the best. And I understand that everybody figured they knew what they were doing, but they didn't. No one did. Now you've got to make this work at this point. And I know it's late in the day, but the only way you can make it work is y'all ever talk about it.
And you talked a minute ago about people needing to be debriefed because they were traumatized. And I heard from one of the Memphis 13 that integrated, one of the ones that integrated the school system here. And she talked about the fact, to me personally, how traumatized she was, and she's just now really able to talk about what happened to her in those days when she went to the elementary school here in Memphis, Tennessee, as one of two black children in that school. So I'm asking, you talked about the community needing to be debriefed. All of us need to be debriefed, and it has never happened. And do you have any recommendations as to how we can do that?
The only thing that I know personally is all these children have to learn how to read. The only way out of this is that we have to read and read well. And if we do not read, this does not end. He just said, I think I just heard Brother Chisholm say, he wants to see the end of race and racism and well, you know, it'd be a nice thing that folks would call themselves black people and white people. Why do you call yourselves that? Why do you identify yourself with a color? I mean, that's crazy. Yet at the same time, We won't address this thing. We won't talk about it. Matter of fact, just as, I know we gotta go.
If you have one more second of that, Judge.
All right. Who is the person that actually designated this Caucasian Negroid, what's the other one? Mongoloid. Who did that? Where did it come from? What year did it happen? In other words, who created race? Why was it created? And why do you think it's a reality?
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
I think, in my experience in the last couple of weeks, Judge Joe Brown doesn't need a microphone. He
No,
can
I
throw it out there
don't.
pretty good. You know?
I'm sort of a pessimist on this. I don't think integration is the problem or the cause of what we are facing right now. It's about to be resurgent because the country's in need of some scapegoats, if only some vicarious scapegoats, because they failed to move the general population into the 21st century so that they are not obsoleted by industrial technology and computerization. The jailhouse to the schoolhouse and back again is basically a product of the society not having ample employment for most of its citizens. So the penitentiaries are a place to store surplus labor. Some people mistakenly think it's a place to get free labor. It's not. It's a warehouse like a grain silo, and the labor's like a commodity, like agricultural commodities. It doesn't make any difference. Next thing is, in the next 25 to 30 years, the country is no longer going to be a majority white country, and that will start setting up coalitions, but there are already phenomenon around, including particularly here, since this is the largest majority black city in America. Most people don't know that, but it is. And it is an experiment in a reversion to a plantation situation where there are a whole lot of people that look one way and a very few of the other that try to maintain control by various means. I think the main problem we have right now, outside of race, and that the tension gets generated by, is the country has gone off into a new paradigm of child rearing. Back in 1968, when the Vietnam War was a hot topic, I heard it often on the West Coast and the East Coast when I traveled around doing BSU activities. And what it was is war is a man thing, so the way to stop war is to change the way boys are raised to men. They should be raised like girls so that they are prone to emote. How do they put it? To emote, to cry, to shout, to let it all hang out instead of trying to be so uptight and under control. They needed to be softer, kinder, gentler, and then we found George Herbert Walker Bush actually started giving out awards to that effect in the late 80s. Then there was the movement where you had white males who were straight, who could not make it in the white world because they said it was unfair competition. In other words, we would call them wimps and nerds now, and they didn't make it, so they had a vested interest. And then the LGBT community was developing, and they got control of the Hollywood industry in the late 60s, and there is a push to emasculate the country. I still see all sorts of things that are put out to stop the violence, but every single one of them I've seen just about is actually part of the causality. I don't know what anybody had for breakfast, lunch, or dinner in the last week, but I guess it would be safe to surmise it had to do with something that once was alive. We hold the interesting position of being the planetary apex predator. We kill anything on the planet we want to eat, stuff, mount, or get rid of, and we do well at killing each other when there's a competition. That's inherent into nature. But over eons, we developed a culture about the way boys were supposed to be raised, so they got deep into duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, dependability, courage, and bravery, and willingness to sacrifice for the many. A popular phrasing of that was known as women and children in the lifeboat first. Women were a resource, so were children. There were some very tight rules and constraints put down on the way boys were raised so that it would become internalized, these values, so he would be under self-control. In the last 50 years, since 1968, I've seen an ever-increasing trend to make it all right to be emotional. Now, I had that show out there for 15 years, and California Supreme Court said what we were doing was binding arbitration under California and U.S. law, and I was qualified as a California arbitrator. And I saw it over and over and over again. Why in the world did you do this? I was emotional. Why do you think that's an excuse? Well, because I was emotional. That's no excuse. Fight after fight with the Hollywood crew out there. I'm not going to do this. That woman is wrong. But you cut down the ratings. If she had succeeded in what she had tried to do, she'd be in jail for first-degree murder. But she was emotional. There's no excuse. And Hollywood is the media industry now, print and electronic. It's switched over into a tabloid mentality. What used to be, if you're old enough, on the last page of the last section, last column, known as the gossip column, is now the priority for the media. They are not interested in reporting the news to you because there's not that much that goes on, but they want ratings because news has become a primary source of entertainment. So they deal with salacious information that'll keep you tuned in to see the latest developments. The news media has become a stand-in for those what I call obscenely sleazy soaps that controlled the country for about 80 years, and apparently it's standing in to give the country a dose of low-life conduct. We, thanks to those things and to a few other points, have become inured to some very reprehensible, awful conduct. This shooting down there in Florida, people are upset because guy had a Smith & Wesson Military and Police MP-15, which is a slant off on a stoner design, that's been around for exactly 65 years. It's the longest serving weapon in the U.S. military's history, but it's not a military weapon. Contrary to what the media lets you know about, an assault rifle is prima facie a full-fledged machine gun that can be switched over to select fire. These don't. It's America's #1 hunting rifle, and I'll just say this, I'm leading up to something. In the entire history of the country, the civilian population has always had access to the latest military rifle, whatever it was. This one is probably the most popular weapon in the country. Is it the problem? No, that's not the real problem. The real problem you see if you look at some of the video where you see that school officer in uniform armed, he doesn't go in to stop it. When you see those 4 deputies who arrive and they crouch behind cars until the shooting's over, when the protocol they got taught by says first thing, go in and stop the shooter, confront him. They didn't. That's cowardice. And that's okay these days because you don't teach that to boys. You don't ram it down their throats that they have an obligation to make where they live a better, safer, more secure, prosperous place with ethics and some kind of reason to be there. That's obsolete. I got a standing ovation from 500 soldiers in the Army Corps of Engineers when I spoke to them, when I said your motto that you advertise is wrong. It's not be all you can be, it's be all you should be. There is a difference. Do your thing. Do what you want to do. Sending the country to hell, excuse the language. And we are not doing anything about it. There's no discipline in the schools. The single parent head of household situations are just incompetent for the most part. And what they see on the media emphasizes ineffective parenting. I saw some of the biggest tycoons and shakers and makers in Hollywood at one party that stands out in my mind. It was an outdoor house party, and there were children there, and it sounded like it was something out of a psychologist convention for child psychologists. The wife of one very prominent studio executive who still has a great deal to do with what you see is standing there, and her son Charles is in the tree. Charles, please come down. You're making mother frightened, Charles. Charles, please come down. I didn't want to, Mama. Charles, mother is going to cry. You'll just have to, Mama. I'll take a 10-minute time out. Charles, and then the executive comes out. Charles, you listen to your mother. You'll have to do a 30-minute time out. Well, I almost choked when this little fool falls out of the tree and fractures his wrist, okay? So instead of them taking this kid to the emergency room, they go through this elaborate drama of calling 911. There happens to be a major one of those wildfires going on, and they really need to be somewhere else, and the paramedic gets mad at them, and they want to throw their weight around about how important they are because they didn't take him in their car to an emergency room that was nearby. They had to tie up 911. I call it the sissification of the country by the taking away of masculine values. I'm not talking about your sex practices behind a bedroom door, that's your business. But I'm talking about when you try to destroy the male component, masculine component of the country, you've got a big problem because you don't have order. You see, you can't make somebody be orderly. I found that out on the criminal bench for 10 years. You can get somebody to want to be orderly and feel good and happy because they did it, because you put it in here as something that is a value. Now, for 10 years, I was on this criminal bench, got elected to 2 8-year terms, retired when I started doing the show full time. But one thing I discovered is that instead of just trying to run a turnstile and seeing how many people I could run through, I decided to set up a panel with a whole lot of doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. We ran a lot of tests, and there were some interesting results out of that, and I started getting feedback that was positive on something I found, and they even agreed it was something of a secret, but not really a secret. The statewide recidivism rate for felons was approximately 80%. It still is. In my courtroom, it was 18%. Why? Because I realized from my exposure going around here over the last 40 years practicing law, and one time running the city public defender's office and seeing what went out with that back in the 70s, is that these boys don't have man training. So what I did is coerce them to sit there with me while I rammed it down their throat. I'd give them no slack at all, and I just got stopped on the way over here by 2 people, separate people, just from the parking lot. Came up and both of them, strangely enough, said, "Judge, you remember me?" I said, "No." "Well, you gave me some time." I said, "Did I give you enough?" "Yeah, but it wasn't that thing. You showed me how to be a man. And now I'm a grandfather, and you know, I have been in no trouble, and you know, like you used to tell us. We don't need the police. What we need is simply to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror every morning when you brush your teeth, comb your hair, or whatever it is, shave and say, am I a man? Have I been acting like one? So you control yourself, and that has gone out of style. I look at what you have on TV and it disgusts me. And the other thing, I'll say this, racism is alive and well in America, but in an unobvious place. I will have to say that in my 70-something years of existence, the most racist, biased, and bigoted place I've ever had to work in Hollywood, California. And they have, I should read you some of the letters that I got complaining because they didn't want to work around a straight black male.
What?
I mean, we used to march over to Human Resources. "Oh, Judge, you got another complaint. What is it?" "They don't want to work around a heterosexual black man." "Oh, they don't." "Would I do anything?" "Yeah, they complain you open doors for women and you're courteous, and they think your courtesy is a slur on their femininity." "Oh?" They are particularly offended when somebody came in and you stood up because 3 women came to the table at the luncheon. Why do you have to keep talking about your slogan of protecting womanhood and promoting manhood? Women don't need to be protected, and men need to be suppressed, not promoted. And they feed poison to you, and if you go to their sites, they'll tell you what they've been doing for the last 50 years. They congratulate each other. This was a great move by director so-and-so and actor such and such to show that this old-time masculine virtue is obsolete. It was subtle, but it was beautiful. California, they send out pamphlets to elementary school students to take home that says, please do not tell your children to try to act like men or act like women or act like gentlemen or act like ladies. It constrains their options. Now, just keep that in mind and then start, the race thing is there. But last remark on that, there was a gentleman named Konrad Lorenz. He was a Jewish psychologist, and he fled Nazi Germany in the 30s. His specialty was animal aggression, but he got fascinated by the American experience. And I think he may have a clue as to why racism and bigotry are so prevalent in this country still. He said most European countries have a pretty homogeneous population, though there may be classes or caste in the society. But other than dress, you can't tell them much from each other, and that results in a massive amount of undisplaced interpersonal hostility and aggression. The European nations are historically always at each other's throats because the mechanism of the Germans, the no-good Huns, the doggone Frenchy frogs, or these elite Englishmen, all of that banter causes your side to look at it as my team versus the other guys, so they put up with a whole lot of tension inside and they displace a lot of aggression. He said at the time America, I think, had 130 million people. He said 30 million of them are Negroes and they're readily identifiable for more than a block away. He said if the 100 million generally homogenous people, though they may be Irish Catholics, Hispanic Catholics, they may be Christian, Protestant, whatever it may be, they may be English or French, they look alike from a distance. He said, but you can tell Negroes from a distance, so by venting their interpersonal hostility and aggression on the 30 million Negroes, even if vicariously, the country actually has more effective and usable cohesion. So I did a paper 49 years ago. It was interesting, caused a lot of talk around UCLA's campus. It was my theory that because at that point in time, for the young white intellectual elite, it was no longer favorable to be racist. They had no one to vent on, so they turned against their own institutions. All the violent anti-war demonstrations, what happened at the '68 Democratic Convention in Chicago, Kent State, the whole 9 yards worth of nobody knows what's going on, and it looks like the country's going to the devil. What happened? The civil rights movement was to a great extent effective in altering the attitudes of a certain significant portion of young whites, but they lost the scapegoat. So they turned on themselves. What you see down in the hood is also no scapegoat, so they turn on themselves. And by the way, this unmanned thing produces violence not only in the hallway, but in the hood. In the white population, it tends to build up and somebody goes crazy, like this Cruz fool down there in South Florida. But you get the same thing in the black neighborhoods. You don't recognize it. It's just piecemeal. Here and there, no man training, emotional response to anything and everything, no dedication to being a productive member of society and leading the society with an ever-broadening circle of responsibility. You don't see that because they don't get man training. I can think back over 40-some years of going and visiting clients who were too damn lazy to come down and see me in my office. I had to go there and I watched the hell that was going on where they lived. No man training. That would not just be in the black community, that would be in the poor white communities too, and all of them are suffering problems, whether you're talking about the trailer park or the hood. And it is getting very bad. Why do you have this problem with the illegals? It's because they still have the damn work ethic. It's strange. In California, where I had a ranch out there, I'd have people doing work. And you'd have to, I'm political, so I'd always want to see somebody's green card or whatever. Sometimes I'd turn my head, but the interesting thing is the people that just got over here, they'd get there half hour early, take no 15-minute break, take 10 minutes for lunch instead of an hour, no afternoon break, stay 2 hours later to hurry up and get to another job and politely ask if you could have some, donate a few lemons or limes out of your citrus groves for their cervezas that they ask permission to bring. Now you get their nephews or their uncles who've been over here and born here or citizens here, they're just as lazy as anybody else at the devil. What happened to you? You were an hour and a half late. What happened to you? Why did you take so long for lunch? Why are you trying to pilfer the gasoline supplies for the machine tools? It's poison because we feel entitled instead of having to earn, deserve, or have experience. New and improved, mostly just new, not improved. Everybody wants something. We've had 50 years of propaganda that if you want it, it's yours. Fantasyland and the Disney World thing. When you wish upon a star, it makes no difference who you are, your dreams come true. We forgot about the hard work aspect. I had a problem when I had a business. I had a bunch of high-paid employees while I was doing this show. I couldn't find anybody to hire, no matter what kind of degrees they had. I said, you know this, but where in the devil is your common sense? What happened to you? I had arguments with the UCLA Faculty Alumni Association. They wanted me to raise money. I said no. Why? Because you're telling these kids that they have their hearts set on having such and such degree, so we don't have to have any side breath requirements because it may cut down their GPAs and their hearts will be broken when somebody else gets accepted. And they come out and they've got postgraduate degrees and don't know a damn thing. You got a PhD, you got an master's degree. I got to come behind you and do your work because you don't know what you're looking at. This isn't something to look up. This is common sense. But see, we have a big problem because we countenance because we want everybody to be kind and gentler instead of taking care of business. But anyway, I just vented on that. I ran into these people out there who said thank you for the man.
And we've got a few minutes left for any questions. Oh, if you haven't signed a clipboard too, come over and sign a clipboard on your way out as well. Yes, ma'am. For Judge Brown.
Judge Brown, you commented just now at the end of your presentation about the proliferation of these degrees, postgraduate degrees that are being handed out to students all over the country. And they really are not deserving of those titles. What kind of impact do you think that is having on the development that is or is not taking place in our?
May I give you my humble opinion?
Sure.
This country got where it is. The black population, the Asian population, Native American population, the Hispanic population, the white population, because at the end of the 19th century, we had something called public education that was supposed to give all citizens of whatever stripe of grounding on what the system was supposed to be about, some grounding on appropriate history to discover how it got that way, work ethic, and to get those basic things you needed to fill in as a viable worker in a newly industrializing society. We have cut that out for a number of reasons, which is the worst fallout for the race problems we've had for the last 50 years. And we have basically gutted our public schools. They can impose no discipline. It is ridiculous to get kids there when it's still dark at 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. You tie up the highways and the streets. The parents are rushed trying to get to work, and then you let them out at 2 o'clock, 2:30. So who gets off work at 2:30? Nobody. So there's all this accommodation that you gotta go pick the kids up. We don't look at it being safe for them to walk 3 blocks. You know, so they gotta get picked up, and they are otherwise left alone with nobody to mind them. They did not get properly disciplined, bringing them, getting brought up. So you can't really trust them to be at home, and what's the solution? You'll give them a doggone video game. You will see a problem. If you want to see a big problem, watch these Liberty Mutual insurance commercials. Worst trash you ever want to see. Look at this. This boy, one of them I really hate. He can't change his time. He got a driver's license, and there are 2 of these boys, and neither one of them knows how to train a driver's license. And this fool mother's going, and I called Liberty Mutual, and they changed my son's tire for him. I saw that the first time, I almost followed it.
So to either of you, what kind of suggestions do you have for how we can break into?
Take control of your public schools and give them some authority to do what they need to do to get these children where they need to be. You need to go down and get on the county commissioners, city councilmen, all your elected officials and say, look, why are you sidetracking so many resources that ought to go to these kids because your friends are no longer getting the money under the table? They're getting it over because you privatized everything and you pay the money on the top of the table.
That's right.
This place is so crooked you would not believe it, but it's right out in the open. They don't even have to cheat. Board of Education's got since we're talking about that, has a legal department. They pay Burge, Porter, and Johnson $350 to $1,250 an hour to do all of their legal work for them. Why the devil do they have a legal department and they're hiring a prestigious law firm to do routine work that a rookie a year out of law school ought to be able to do? And we pay for it. They went through a thing to save money because they've got Teach America privatized that. You know now the requirement is teachers don't need a college degree. They can get an associate degree, 2 years. The board doesn't even choose them. They got a private business run by a 29-year-old with no educational background, and they get to select the teachers, train them, choose who's to be hired, and where they get assigned. And that's our school system. Here. So is it any wonder it's dropping off to the edge of the flat world?
She already knows my answer to the question that she asked. If you're asking me what needs to be done relative to the school system, again, your children need to know how to read. Not by the 3rd grade. They need to know how to read before they ever go to school. And once upon a time, that's what was going on when the communities controlled their own schools. Now you've placed the control of the school in the hands of some people at the state level, and they do not want these children learning anything about you. Here I'm pointing at you, Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
They don't want these children learning anything about you or Joe Brown or anybody coming out of their own communities and actually struggling to change this whole thing. They don't want the children to learn about that.
So but you're saying the children should learn how to read, but you've got these problems with even having an impact or an influence on the school board members and whoever else might be in charge. How do we break into that really is what I'm asking.
We don't have to break in anything. We have to go back to what it was originally. You all had blueback spellers in the school. Don't y'all remember? Don't you remember? You had blueback spellers. Noah Webster designed the blueback speller. It worked. Where is it? Just that simple.
Well, he's absolutely right. You have to get back to the fundamentals. We're too much on wishing on a star rather than doing the work. Let me give you an example.
Let me say one thing. I heard a stat this week The Department of Education was formed, Federal Department of Education, in 1980. That time, our ranking in the world in education for America was number 2. Now we're number 17. How do we lose so much by putting this big umbrella on
But
everybody?
do you know how it became number 1? See, Carter G. Woodson was not hired to develop Negro History Week. He was hired to develop a federal education system. He was teaching school in Washington, D.C., and they couldn't pull it together. And he only agreed to allow what he had put together to become the system if they would include the education of African people. And that's how Colored History Week came into existence. But it had nothing to do with him being the father of anything. He designed the whole thing. And they pulled the system together, but the states fought against what he had actually, and they wanted control. Each state wanted control of education in that state. And that's where your problems are.
Well, let me add something to this to show you how bad it has gotten, particularly in the black communities of this country. Just last week, I reread something that President Grant, who at one time was the commander of the Union Army, wrote about the colored soldier. He said, I find it very interesting that the only completely literate units in the whole of the Union Army are all colored. He said, you never see a colored soldier without a reader and a slate to practice his writing. They don't get drunk, they don't get disorderly, they take care of hygiene, they read, and they practice their writing. Every one of them, when they take a break, will pull out a reader or a tablet at every chance they get. What happened? I think what's going on is we've gotten too deep into something that was meant well. I saw it when I first started practicing law, quote, the #1 case I had when I worked, A.C. Wharton was the director down there at Legal Services back in the early 70s. #1 case was getting the check cut back on because 1 or 2 out of the 5 to 7 fathers of the children in the household was trying to be an effective father, and they cut the check off. So there we had to go through, got all kinds of assurances that the father would not come in the household. Turner, who was a juvenile court judge, the first time I tangled with him back in '74, he called me the N-word, didn't realize I was a lawyer instead of a defendant. He used to say, I don't care if it's your kid or not, doesn't look like you anything, feed him long enough, he'll look just like it. So there was a diminution of the institution of fatherhood. And I will tell you one little very quick story. 1967 and 8, a friend of mine and I were recruiting for colleges out there. And we set up in what was then known as Jordan Downs, one of the worst projects in Los Angeles' area.
What?
Yeah. So anyway, what happens is that we had money because it didn't cost to go to a California college. There was no tuition back then. And it was a government priority. Kennedy had said we're going to get a man on the moon by the end of the decade. So most of the people we interviewed gave us something like this: are you telling the truth, man? You can get me out of this place, or sister, you want, well, brother, can I get out of here? What I gotta do? Go see somebody. We have 2 ladies over in the rec room that help me fill out the paperwork. I'm on it. We'd run into one of these. He had lost your fool mind. My caseworker told me I had to come over here and talk to you fools. You done lost your mind. You think I'm gonna go to school or waste my time getting some damn job? All I got to do is flat back and get a bigger check. So they did, and that has become the culture. So you had this thing with what we used, my mother's generation used to call the women of ill repute. And every community had a few of those, whether you were white or black. But the bottom line is because of circumstances, that woman of ill repute category got big and bigger and bigger, so it doesn't make any difference. So now you just have a situation where you don't have man training anywhere in general in the society. And when you do, they're getting told something's wrong with it. So the Oriental philosophies go into what they call yin-yang balance. You ever been someplace and you've seen that circle where part of it is white, part of it's black, but it looks like a teardrop? Where one side, the feminine aspect, is strong, the male has a little tail there, and where he's strong, a little, it's balanced, yin-yang. But we have destroyed that. And as the ancients said, if you destroy your yin-yang balance, you've got a messed up society. So we've got to get back to saying it's all right to be a man. It's all right to be hard, cold, calculating, and under self-control instead of running around with these little emotive-headed fools that I've been dealing with for a long time. Oh, it's such a straighten up act like a man. What's wrong with you? Oh, it's okay if he cries. Our mama knows it hurt. That didn't hurt him. Get up, fool. And you see, that's the way I got raised. Get up and be manly. Nowadays, they want to call the police. Get on you because you didn't have appropriate sympathy for the boy.
And to add to what you're saying, a close friend of mine spent some time around some young people that were in the Shelby County Kingman Farm young men. And what he said he learned was that their badge of honor, of being and courage of being a man now, is to parent as many, father rather, or bring into this world as many children as you can by as many different women as you can. That's what they're seeking to do now, as opposed to the reverse, which is what you just
Well,
said.
in other words, instead of being manly and being a provider, you try to show your animal fecundity, and that's supposed to give you masculinity. Speaking of the penal form, I had an intimate thing with it when this fool Harold Horn had me locked up for 5 days for contempt when I went off on his incompetent, trifling self. He ought to be in jail for some wrongdoing stuff. I have an inactive license due to a medical condition, so they can't touch me. Do you know what I was doing out there? I'd have 15 and 20 detention specialists out there hanging on my words about manhood. They'd come over in, shifts. Judge, I told come down there, and they said, oh, really? Wow, So I still get calls from these young people that were out there, had no clue, they'd never heard what I was telling them. And they're locking all these other folk up out there. They said, and one supervisor said, I remember when I first started, I'd never seen anything like it. You came out here and we had 150 inmates and they gave you a standing ovation when you walked in. And they were all talking about man training.
So we have a commissioner in the room. Oh,
Do it.
and was. I want to know from
Well,
Mr.
Ms.
Chisholm.
Buck, we're after the 9 o'clock hour tonight, so we're gonna roll it up. We are gonna have, I'd like to make an announcement, there will be future talk about it Tuesdays in March and April, and just stay tuned for that, because we could go for a long time tonight. I mean, once we end the program here, feel free to talk back and forth, I'm sure, too. Just also want to remind everybody about the cards to pick up. Go to worldfamousfieldstreet.com when you go and purchase something online, and that'll benefit Withers Collection. And then come back on Wednesday, April the 4th, about a month away. Come down to Beale Street at 10 o'clock and be a part of the largest reenactment of the iconic I'm a Man photograph. The helicopter's going to be in the air. Ron Hurd's got to go to Beale Street with his camera, too. You got to get that helicopter, Ron.
I have get the heck out. I'll think about it.
So,
But
I hate to cut this. We're going to bring this to a close tonight for our sake of time. And for this whole month, it's been a terrific 4 Tuesday nights. And I want to personally thank everybody at the Withers Collection for putting this on. Hope the word will spread. This forum has been terrific. We've had so many diverse points of view from Mr. Dates and Dr. Black and, of course, Judge Brown and the other participants in the weeks before. It's been really an eye-opening experience, a learning experience for us all. So let's give everybody a round of applause. know we want somebody, Mr. Dacius, you come over here so we can get a little photo op. Y'all might want to come get a photo op for folks here.
You tell them how we met up years ago.
One in jail, what?
Oh, I tell it. You know what it was? He was a cop then.
Yeah.
And he met me at an unmarked grave with a body in it, unregistered, back up in some old rundown cemetery.
Wow.
He was with his partner.